Hello and welcome back to another episode of Ruining Your Childhood.
Welcome back to another episode of Ruining Your Childhood, one sculpt at a time. Today we're going to be sculpting a classic, a character that was honestly bred for something like this. So today we're going to be taking everybody's favorite mouth breather and turning him into someone you might actually see at a gas station at 2 a.m. And that's right folks, we are going to be sculpting Butthead. After taking a ball of aluminum foil that I shaped into a rough head shape, we're going to go ahead and coat that with a nice skin flap of clay, rounding it off and cutting off the excess bits. I am going to be keeping this little protrusion on the bottom here, that's going to be his neck. After smoothing everything down with the side of my sculpting tool, we could go ahead and start on his big ol' schnoz. As for the schnoz, I went ahead and pinched off a dank nug of clay, shaping it into a long triangle, slicing off the back end so it could fit flush to the face. Then I do a little bit of refining where the nostrils are going to go. Took a small ball stylus, poking in those nostrils, and then we could apply it to the face. I went ahead and smoothed that all out using a small ball stylus and a silicone sculpting tool. Happy with the placement of his nose, we could go ahead and start on his little beady eyes. I went ahead and pre-baked a ball of clay that I sliced in half, firmly pressing them into the face. With his eyes in their proper position, I could go ahead and start adding his upper eyelids and lower eye bags by adding little dank nugs of clay, then taking my thumb and just blending that in. I then go ahead and do the exact same thing for the other side, making sure everything's all blended in before following it up with a little bit of detailing with my small ball stylus. Moving downward to the bottom section of his face, we're going to start building out his jaws by taking these little flaps of clay that are rounded off in the end, blending those into the face. As for his upper lip, I took another slice of clay, laying that on top, blending that in as well, before we move on to his bottom lip. As for his lower lip, I went ahead and took a piece of tapeworm, tapering off both ends, applying that to the face. Then we could kind of bulk out the chin using this little nug of clay, and then we just blend that all in together. In hindsight, I actually probably should have added his teeth first, but you know, you live, you learn. So we're gonna be just kind of fiddling with this and sticking it in there, but right now I'm adding a little chunk of clay. This is gonna be his gums. After I get that inserted underneath his upper lip, we could go ahead and start adding his teeth. For his teeth, I went ahead and used a pre-baked translucent clay to make these little rock munchers. Once we get all of his little teeth in their proper positions, we could go ahead and start refining his upper and lower lip using a silicone sculpting tool. I kind of just go and push down the clay around it to make them lips pop a little bit more. And continuing the process of adding more detail, I'm just going to be taking a variety of different sculpting tools, going around the face, adding details and wrinkles across the forehead, sides of the mouth, and lips, just to make it a little bit more interesting. I really like the fact that they have tiny ears in the show, so we are going to be staying true to that. I went ahead and rolled out a ball of clay, flattening it, then slicing it in half to make these little tiny ears. Attaching them to the side of the face, I then go in with a small ball stylus to add the inner ear detail. And with the ears done, that pretty much concludes the face except for one minor detail, his braces. Went ahead and rolled out a very thin piece of tapeworm, applying that to the front of his teeth. I then take a small ball stylus, going in, attaching it to the teeth, and using a silicone sculpting tool, I kind of shape out these little braces. And with his braces done, we could go ahead and stick a pole up his neck, that way his body has something to attach to, and then off to the oven. And with his head back and baked, we could go ahead and start on his body. As for this body, he started off with a ball of clay that I roll out into a cylinder shape, roughly around the same size as his head. Sticking that onto that pole, I go ahead and pinch it onto the neck, slicing off the little excess bits to make a collar. I just use my finger here to kind of shape out his belly. Happy with how that looks, we could go ahead and add the bottom of his shirt by adding a flattened out piece of clay that I wrap around the body, then using my finger with some isopropyl alcohol, we smooth that out. I go ahead and do a little bit of flaring out on the bottom of the shirt to make it more realistic before we could start on his collar. Much like the bottom of the shirt, we're going to take a flattened out piece of clay, wrapping that around the neck, cutting off the excess bit, then using a silicone sculpting tool, I'll blend that seam in. We're going to call that good. To add a little bit more realism to the sculpture, we're going to take this piece of fabric, lay that over top of the clay, then using our thumb, we're just going to smudge that in just to give it a little bit more texture and more detail, so when we paint over top of it, it kind of makes it pop a little more. Quick little bake to save our progress, and onto his shoulders. For the shoulders, I'm just going to be taking a few nugs of clay, smashing that onto the side of the body. After a wee bit of shoulder refinement, I take the back end of my X-Acto knife to blend things out. Before we start on the arms, I'm going to take the back end of my paintbrush, pushing this into the little shoulder bits, just to add a little bit of overhang on top of the arms. As for Butthead's arms, I went ahead and took these pre-cut pieces of armature wire that I coat in some liquid Sculpting. This is really just going to help the clay stick to the armature wire. After giving it a nice thick coat of clay, I go ahead and roll it out so we have a nice tube shape. We can then start adding some details to the arm. The look we're kind of going for here is like that skinny ripped, where he's like oddly veiny. He looks like the type of guy that would probably wear an Under Armour that was too big for him, so it kind of just flopped around. I'm really just basing this off of what my arm looked like when I was 8. Anyway, now that we got his arm into this proper position, I was happy with the size and length. We went ahead and did the other one off camera, and we could go ahead and start adding his sleeve. For this, I just did the same exact technique that I did for the lower part of the shirt, adding a flattened out piece of clay, letting it overhang, and then just flattening out the top bit. And to add a little bit of detail to the shirt, I'm gonna take a silicone sculpting tool, extending from the armpits, adding some wrinkles. Now I'm going to be trying something I've never done before, but that's using liquid Sculpey to add the illusion of veins. Instead of just painting on the arms just to make them look like veins, why not make them bulge a little bit? So I took a small ball stylus, dipping it in some liquid Sculpey. I then just go over top of the arm, drawing in these little veins, pop it in the oven real quick, and honestly I was pretty happy with how they came out. They're just very subtle. They just subtly pop out of the arm. I also added a few wrinkles to the shirt using that liquid Sculpey just to give it a little more interest. And with the upper part of his body complete, we could start on his legs. Took a little ball of clay, smashing it onto the bottom portion of his body. Then, to give it a little bit more shape, I take an X-Acto knife, just trimming off excess bits of clay. Now that we got a shape that resembles tidy whities, we could go ahead and start on his legs. Using a double hand rollout technique, I roll out a couple of tubes of clay, follow that up with a piece of armature wire coated in that delicious clay bonding adhesive. I then insert thus wire into the clay tube, inserting those into the hips. After I was happy with the placement, we could go ahead and blend those out using a variety of different ball styluses and silicone sculpting tools. Once we got everything smoothed out and looking like a Ken doll, we could go ahead and start adding some more leg detail. I just use my fingers to kind of pinch around the calves here to give them more calf-like details. Adding some behind the knee detail using the back end of my X-Acto knife. I then spent an excessive amount of time drawing in his butt crack using different silicone sculpting tools. As for his knees, I just took a couple dank nugs of clay, sticking that onto the front, then blending it in. After a bit of off-camera refining, I was pretty happy with how the legs came out, so we could start on his shorts. For these, we're just basically going to be doing the same exact technique as I did for the sleeves and bottom of the shirt, taking a piece of flattened out clay, wrapping it around, cutting off the excess bits, then smoothing out the top portion. Once we got everything all smoothed out, I went ahead and took the grippy portion of my X-Acto knife and just rolled that along the surface of the shorts. This gives it a little bit more texture and a little more interest, so when we paint it, we could dry brush some of that nice texture on top. Once everything's all texturized, we can go ahead and stick it in the oven for a bake. And with Butthead back and baked, all we have to do is add his appendages. Starting with his socks, much like his other piece of clothing, we're just going to be laying on a piece of flattened out clay, and then using a silicone sculpting tool, I just meticulously go around adding these little lines to give it that tube sock look. I then slide a silicone sculpting tool over the top to give it some wrinkles, and then we can start on his shoes. For the shoes, I just start with this little block of clay that I slice in half, then taking one of those sections, rounding off the front part to make the front of the shoe. I then go around with my fingers, just give it more shoe detail, rounding off the back, adding a little bit of a drop part for the laces. Do a little size check here. Once I was happy with that, we can move forward with the detailing. I took the back end of my X-Acto knife, drawing this little line around to make the sole of the shoe. I then follow that up by cutting a little groove out for where the ankle's gonna go. I then take a small ball stylus, working my way around the shoe, adding little shoe details. To finish things off, I took a big ball stylus, putting a little notch in there so it slides right into the ankle. Went ahead and finished the other shoe off camera. So now we got a matching set, and now all we have to do is attach them to the bottom of the legs. I wanted the shoes to feel like they're kind of overlapping the socks, so I went ahead and weighted off on the tongue of the shoe to add those later, and all those are just little flaps of clay that I add and smooth on. I do add laces, but apparently I forgot to film it, so you'll see those just randomly pop on there. Now that we're done with the feet, we could start on his hands. Taking a couple of dank nugs of clay, we're gonna fasten those to the ends of the wrist. Then after smoothing those out, we could go ahead and start adding his fingies using an X-Acto knife. I'm gonna go ahead and start carving these in, starting with the thumbs first. Taking my X-Acto knife and make a few precision slices to get out these little wedges, separating the fingers from the thumbs. I then take the back end of my X-Acto knife, drawing in his little fingies, then followed it up with a silicone sculpting tool just to refine the shape a bit more. After I was happy with the fingers, we could go ahead and add the back of the hand detail using a metal ball stylus. Finish things off, we'll give it all good rub down with some isopropyl alcohol and a paintbrush just to get rid of all those fingerprints and tool markings, and we could put it in the oven for its final bake. And with Butthead back and baked, we could go ahead and start the painting process. I like to start things off by giving the whole thing a base coat of its initial base coat colors. Starting with the shoes, they're going to get a nice thick black coat of paint. And to make my life a little bit easier, we're going to just go ahead and move upstairs to his shirt, painting it the exact same black color. Moving downstairs, we're going to start on his shorts. They're going to be getting a nice thick coat of cadmium red. Once I had everything coated, we can move down to his socks. I'm going to be using a color called parchment. I actually use this color quite a bit. It's my favorite off-white tone. And with Butthead's clothes completely painted, we could start slapping on that skin tone. How I got this color was by mixing a few different paints, starting with unbleached titanium, a color called dark flesh, which is basically just an orangish yellow tone, and then we finish it off with just the tiniest bit of that cadmium red. Now it's really important that I water down this paint, that way we can make multiple coats. This just kind of helps to avoid getting those paint marks and just gives an overall flat look. This whole process takes about 5 or 6 coats, but in the end it looks pretty good. Now that we got all the base coats completed, we could go ahead and start punching in those details. For the whites of the eyes, I'm just going to be using that same exact color that I used for the socks. It's that parchment color, has a really nice off-white look, and I feel like it looks really good for the eyes. As for the teeth, I'm just going to go over top of them with the white, then we can move on to his gums. I first started off with a base coat of the cadmium red, then finishing it off with a pink. As for Butthead's braces, using a silver paint, I pencil it in with my smallest paintbrush. And now that we have the mouth complete, we can really start making the skin come to life. This is my favorite part when it comes to painting, is just adding washes, because this is how you can really make the thing look more alive. I use a variety of different red, yellow, orange washes to go over top of the face, really highlighting the cheekbones, chin, lips, under eye bags, ears, elbows, fingers, knees, anywhere on the body where there's going to be a lot of movement and blood flow. It's an incredibly simple technique, but it could add so much value to your actual sculpture. Honestly, there's really no method to the madness to this, it's just adding some paint and then wiping it off. Now that I was happy with how the skin was looking, we could go ahead and finish up his eyes by adding the browns of the eye and then adding a little tiny pupil. Now, despite the fact I am going to be using real hair, I am just going to be painting on his eyebrows. They're a little too small for me to be trying to finagle with some hair there. Going down to his shirt, we're going to be giving it a gray dry brushing over the top. I want his shirt to kind of give it that weathered, old vintage t-shirt kind of vibe. Once I let that fully dry, we could then start adding that AC/DC logo. I did think about using a stencil for this to make the letters a little bit more crisp, but then I kind of like the idea of it just being a little messy, almost like he made the shirt himself. So after painstakingly painting in those letters, we could finish off the shorts by adding a dark red wash to his crotch, belt line, and butt crack. And with that completes the painting process, and now we could start adding on that glorious mullet of his. Now this is the part of the sculpture I was honestly dreading the most, but it ended up not being too bad. For this, I'm going to be using this stuff called Fabric Fusion and some snippets of a wig I own. After I lay down a nice thick layer of that Fabric Fusion, we could go ahead and start sticking on the hair, letting it fully dry before starting the next layer. I'm starting from the back, working my way to the front, that way it kind of all falls over top of each other, giving it a nice layered look. And once I get all the hair fastened to the head, it's just a matter of trimming it until we get that glorious mullet. And with some last second surprise detailing and a little bit of assembly, we're on to those glamour shots. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. I hope you all enjoyed it. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, and also leave a comment down below of who you would like to see me sculpt next. I'll see you next time.